I love watercolour and I really enjoy mixed media, so I really like using pastel pencils. Whether it's something like this, a sketch in the garden, where I've used line work with pastel pencils on top of watercolour, sun shining, but I hope you can see that. Or maybe something like this portrait, where I've used line and wash for the actual portrait, and then I've added finishing touches with pastel pencils on top. So when Lightswish said, did I fancy trying out their Nyoni pastel pencils? I said, yes, please, that would be great. My name's Liz Chaderton. I'm a watercolour artist based in Berkshire. Every week I bring you a tip, trick or technique that I wish I'd known about ages ago. And I also like exploring new media. So join me as I swatch out the Nyoni pastel pencils and I show you a few of the techniques and the way that I use them in with my watercolour. When I use pastel pencils with watercolour, on the whole, I tend to use them in portraits, something like this, when I just feel I want a different mark, so I might do quite a controlled mark in just a few places. You can see around her lips and on her nose, maybe a bit of zhuzhy colour elsewhere. Or let's turn this guy round. You can see work in his beard, across his nose. Maybe when I want a little bit of opacity to mix with the transparency of the watercolour. Or maybe when I feel it just needs a bit of definition or something like that. I occasionally use them when I'm out and about sort of sketching. Again, when I want some line work, but I don't want, say, the heaviness of ink. I want something that's definitely, well, I find pastels and watercolour work together really nicely, so they just give an interesting mark. That's how I use them. Just to give you an idea, they are made in China. In the UK, they cost $26.99. In the US, they cost $28.99. So that gives you an idea of their range. So what I thought I'd do is swatch them all out on, this is black watercolour paper. I thought they might show up better because I do use them for their opacity, so I wanted to have a look at that. And maybe I'll try and find a couple of similar colours in my usual brand, which is Derwent or Conte à Paris. So I'll have a look at those and see how they compare. First things first, they come in a nice sturdy tin, and there is a colour chart on the back, which is great. They're made in China, as I said. And when we open them up, bit of a protector, and then we've got two layers. And one thing I do like is they've got these little elastic bits for lifting the layers out, because it's always a fiddle otherwise. They look really nice. I like the bare sort of wooden barrel. They say that everything is, they're non-toxic and they're acid free, and that the pastel is break resistant. If we look at one of the pencils, what really cheers me up is that they all have a light fastness rating on them. So it goes from 1 to 5 stars. This one is 4.5. I guess that's 4.5. Might be that the star hasn't printed properly. Anyway, very good light fastness. And then I noticed there are a couple in here that are only a 1 star. I think it was one of the oranges. Let's have a look. No, not that one. Yeah, one of the oranges. So that orange is only a 1 star. There's a couple of 2 stars and I think a 3 star. The rest are 4 and 5. Most of them are pretty light fast. They've obviously got a colour swatch on the end to match the colour so that you know what's going on. It's a 4.2mm lead. They say that it is break resistant, which is great because you know what it's like as you sharpen your pencils. The lead breaks and breaks and breaks, and you seem to be down to here before you find a bit that isn't broken. So let's hope that is true. I haven't sharpened any of them yet. By the way, if I was sharpening a pastel pencil, I would use a utility knife or, you know, a sharp knife rather than a pencil sharpener. you can get a far longer, sort of more exposed bit of the lead, so that not only have you got a fine tip, but you can use the side of it as well. Colour wise, if we look, they are very muted as a palette. It seems to be very short on yellows. There is only one that was even close to yellow there. A few reds and a couple of blues. I'm feeling that this palette of them will be good for portraits, and I guess that is probably why they've got a portrait on the front. But as a general pastel pencil range, maybe it's light on sort of some of the primaries. So the best thing for me to do is to swatch them out. And as I say, because for me, I want to see them bring opacity to my work, I'm doing it on this black watercolour paper. If you are a pastel artist, no doubt you would use a totally different surface, but I'm a watercolourist who rather likes mixed media rather than anything else. So I'm immediately noticing they're pretty hard. That's not a good or a bad thing, it's just that they are harder probably than those Derwent pastels I usually use. Now that could be quite useful for detailed work. It might, if you actually wanted to do an entire picture in these. Oh, I shouldn't talk, should I? Because I do get confused. What number am I on? Hold on, 29, yeah, good, hurrah. Oh, that's a lovely colour. Isn't that nice? This is the 1 Star Orange. It's rather a nice colour, to be honest. So if you were wanting to do an entire picture in this, I think that hardness wouldn't be great, but it might be quite useful for detail. Oh, this is a 3 star, so it's a bit middly in their light fastness scale. That is a 4.5 star as far as I can see. That is a gorgeous colour. Look at that. That's really plummy and yummy. And that's a 3 star, so somewhere in the middle of that scale. Okay, that's the first layer. Let's move on. And we've got a rather nice grey here. On first look, they oh, 007. License to Kill. Quite a nice colour. Yeah, I was going to say they don't seem to be producing a huge amount of dust, which is probably a good thing. Dark brown probably won't show up terribly well. This is the other 1 star, this purple. This is a 3 star, the green. And again, I do like that green. This looks like a black, so, oh no, a very dark blue. That was quite hard to tell from the end. I'm glad to see a very dark blue because I was just thinking we were a bit short on blues. So black on black, not that helpful, is it? Okay, so that's our range. I'm just going to grab a stump and just see how they blend and move. Actually, if I just do half, probably more sensible. Okay, so there is quite a lot of blending there, so maybe they're not quite as hard as I thought they were. I don't tend to need them to blend that much, but it's good to know what they might be capable of doing should the need arise. This is a burnt sienna from Derwent, and it's definitely a lot softer. Just the density of the pigment as it goes on. If you compare it with, ooh, we're probably quite close to, is that 17? Yeah, this definitely feels softer and a bit more dense. Let's grab one of those Conte ones. Again, looking quite a lot softer. We haven't actually got much that's close, or really anything that's particularly close. But I know this isn't close at all, but we'll just have to improvise. Yeah, again, look, that's the Conte, so a lot softer than that one. That's interesting. So my perception that they are softer is correct. I'm just going to point out that though I am guessing this is a portrait set, I bought these Contes as a portrait set. Poor old red's bit in the dust, need to give that a sharpen. And I have found them incredibly useful for my sort of highlights. I'm pretty sure that I used these to do this. So the blue, the yellow, bit of the white, bit of that rich pink, and somewhere in there, yeah, that sort of orangey peachy pink colour. Just because you were doing portraits, it doesn't mean that you need all sort of neutrally skin tones. And of course, you've got to think about different Caucasian skins and dark skins and Oriental skins. So this woman, again, I brought out a lot of blue in her skin, different colours in her hair and so forth. I'm not convinced about the palette. I like the colours, but for my style of work, maybe I need something with a little bit more punch. Let's just have a look at those two blues together. So that's the Lightswish blue, and that was the Conte blue. And I just wanted to show you how I used them when I took them out sketching. So this was, I went to a friend's garden, had a beautiful display of multicoloured sunflowers. And I added, I hope you can see, some sort of really loose pencil marks, really sort of holding the pencil right at the end to get a very uncontrolled wiggly line. And then it occurred to me that they might move rather nicely with water. So just using a bit of clean water, I dampen that line in places, and indeed they make a beautiful wash, quite an opaque wash, but really rather a nice wash. The pastel pencils are a little bit more versatile than you might expect. So you can use them with your watercolours, and if you're not that keen on the mark, you can wash them out to create some really rather lovely wishy-washy marks to blend further in with your work. So thank you to Lightswish for sending these to me. I've really enjoyed using them and rediscovering the fun of mixed media with pastel pencils, because I hadn't used them for a while. As a set to play with, see whether you like using them in your work. I think they're really rather nice, and I'm really enjoying working with them.